Welcome to the World of Literature. At World of Literature today, we would be dealing with the critical analysis of sonnets from Amoretti. Now, before taking up the individual sonnets, selected individual sonnets from the series Amoretti, it is important to mention here that Amoretti's critical interpretation is highly dependent upon the sermons delivered by Edmund Spenser during the same time span when he was writing Amoretti. Therefore, when we read the sonnets from Amoretti, what we find is many allusions of the Bible or many phrases that Edmund Spenser has used in Amoretti, the sermon that he delivered in the morning, and if in the late evening he wrote a sonnet, that sonnet would have many ideas which were either taken out of that sermon that he delivered earlier, or there would be lots of phrases or words that he will use in the evening. Another important thing that needs to be kept in mind when reading Amoretti is that there are many references in the sonnets or allusions in the sonnet series Amoretti from the book of Psalms, which is a book in the Bible, because mostly the sermons during that particular time period when Amoretti was being written by Edmund Spenser, he was delivering sermons on the book of Psalm from Bible. So let's take up the sonnet 2 or Amoretti 2, the second sonnet from Amoretti, and have on your screen is the text of the sonnet. Unquite thought home at the first I bred of the inward bale of my love pined heart. Now that is, if you read, since we have dealt with reading of this sonnet, you know the meaning of these verses. So I won't be dealing with the meaning and explanation of these verses in detail, but we will look at the critical aspects of these sonnets. Now, if we see, there is one important concept that we have in this particular sonnet, and that is breeding of a child or giving birth to someone, inside you. Now that is like giving birth to the feelings of love, feelings of affection. There is a significant classical poetic conceit where it is believed that a poet gives birth, or for that matter a lover gives birth to a minor lover, and then that minor lover would in return harm, hurt, eat, survive upon the one who has bred him, upon the one who has born him. And here when we read this sonnet, for example, in this sonnet, in the second quatrain, we find Edmund Spenser talks about the viper's brood. Now viper's brood would be the origination of that minor lover, those feelings of love or that existence of love inside someone who has fallen in love with someone. And this sonnet deals with those pains, problems, troubles, and sighs that this lover gives to him. For example, even if you take up the text as it is on your screen, that and Sidons have with sighs and sorrows fed. This is a very commonplace conceit. This is a very commonplace idea that we often have in poetry, the poetry of any type, whether it be poetry written in English, whether it be poetry written in Urdu, or it be poetry written in any language. This is a very common expression. This is a very common emotion which is expressed like, since the day I have fallen in love, I have only two things to do: sighs and sorrows. For example, if you have read Urdu poetry, we have a poet known as Daag Dhelvi. He remarks beautifully कि कलेजा मेरे मुंह को आएगा एक दिन यूं ही लब पे आहो फुगा आते आते. Now if you read that particular poem, that has got a similar kind of structure, a similar kind of construct, where a lover is time and a lover's message is time and again being rejected. For example, Daag Dhelvi says नतीजा कुछ न निकला, थके सब पयामी, वहां जाते जाते यहाँ आते आते. Now, a similar kind of structure we have in this particular sonnet, that the love is being rejected time and again, and because of that, the lover is in a state where वो सिर्फ आहें भरता है, सिर्फ आहू फुगां का माहौल है. And here we have Edmund Spenser with all sighs and sorrows. Now, one word that I wanted to share here with you is the inward bail that he has used here in the second verse. Now, inward bail, since I said earlier in the lecture that these sonnets are to be read in context of the sermons delivered by Edmund Spenser during that point of time, in context of the Bible. Now, this inward bail is actually taken from book of Psalms chapter 119 verse 11, which actually reads like, thy words have I hid within my heart. And later this inward bail has also got a reference to the book of Matthew, or the Gospel of Matthew chapter 23 verses 27 and 28. Now, what actually Edmund Spenser is here doing when he uses this word inward bail, he says that at the first I bred up the inward bail of my love-pined heart, that it was the unquiet thought, it was the anxious thought to whom I told are bred about my inward bail. Now, this inward bail, if it is read in context of Psalm 119:11, thy words have I hid within my heart, which means there was a secret in the heart of poet, of the lover, which he told for the first time to his beloved, rather to the anxious thought. Or a second thing would be that this anxious thought of his about his beloved has given rise to a secret that is inside his heart, which is hidden in his love-pined heart. And then he says that the condition of this inward, the condition of this heart is such that it's like inward bail. Now, if read in context of book of Matthew, chapter 23 verses 27 and 28, that particular verse would contrast the inner corruption and the outward conduct of scribes and Pharisees. Now, scribes and Pharisees would be going more in detail, which I won't be, because scribes and Pharisees are actually non-Christians, those who do not follow the Christian theology or Christian ideology. They are called as scribes and Pharisees and are the ones to whom Jesus was not sent. Now, in the context of the Bible, it would be like that contrast between the inwardness and outwardness of a person. And here, in context of this sonnet, when we read unquiet thought, whom at first I bred up the inward bail of my love-pined heart, he says that since this thought of love has risen in my heart, there has been a significant change in myself, in my inner part of the heart, and in my outward stature. There is a great contrast, and the only one who knows about it is the unconscious thought, or this whole hypocritic state that has risen within me is because of the anxious thought. And when we read the second quatrain of this sonnet, these vipers brood are used even in the Gospel of Luke chapter 3 verse 7, and everywhere it refers to the evil generation, or it refers to again those Pharisees and scribes. It refers to the generation of sinners, one which harm actually the humanity, one who are not good for the humanity. And here in this concept, this viper's brood is a reference to that small child, that love which has grown inside the heart of the poet, or inside the heart of the lover, which in return is creating a lot of troubles for the poet. Another thing that is worth mentioning here is if you read the second quatrain, Edmund Spenser writes, and seek some succor both to ease my smart and also to sustain thyself with food. Now the word that he has used here, smart. Now this word smart, Spenser has used this word also in Fairy Queen. Now if you read Fairy Queen, in Fairy Queen he writes, he uses this word smart twice. For example, on your screen is that stanza, those verses from Fairy Queen, and they read, "Scars so conceived in her jealous thought, what time and sad tidings of his baleful smart, in woman's bondage tell us to her brought. I am attired best counsel to impart, to all that shall require my comfort in their smart." Now when we read this word smart in context of the usage in Fairy Queen, in these verses, and in context of the Amoretti, we find that smart means either bad condition or bad circumstances, or it means pain, or it means trouble. Now even in this sonnet, when Edmund Spenser makes use of the word smart, it means pain, it means uneasiness, and that is why he says, both to ease my smart and also to sustain thyself with food. Now he again calls in that since love, since you have bread in my heart, you have been creating a lot of troubles for me, it is better for you to find a way, to find a help, to find an aid wherein you can also help in easing down the pain. And when we read quatrain third and the concluding, there is an abrupt shift in the theme of this sonnet, where the poet forgets all troubles or all pains of love about which he was talking initially, and all of a sudden he addresses his beloved and says, like, "But if in the presence of that fairest proud thou chanced to come, fall lowly at her feet." Now in the initial sonnets of Amoretti, there is a significant stress laid by Edmund Spenser upon proud or upon pride. If you read Amoretti 1, Amoretti 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, even up to 21, you will find that Edmund Spenser actually appreciates the pride or the proud, the characteristic of this pride in his beloved. And even if we read here, the phrase that he has used, fairest proud, is an example of that attitude of Edmund Spenser, though later he would be criticizing his beloved when he would be using the word rebellious pride, when his beloved does not listen to him. So all of a sudden the fair proud are in another sonnet where he uses portly pride, that converts that changes into a rebellious pride. But what we find that in the thematic concerns of this sonnet, if there are for example, there are two themes that we have so far seen. In the first two quatrains, the theme is the theme of pain of love. Whenever that thought of love comes to someone, the pain that it gives, the trouble that it gives is well explained in first few lines. And that classical topos, that poetic conceit of the birth of a small lover, which later would create troubles for the same person within whom it has risen, within whom it has born or originated. And the second thing is about proud, that how at the initial stage of infatuation or in the initial stage of love, how the lover is actually impressed and inspired by anything and everything that he finds in his beloved. Everything is worth liking, like Edmund Spenser here calls her beloved as fairest proud. And another important thing is that fall lowly at her feet. Now this is a typical romantic, poetic expression, that for acceptance of my love, go to any extent, fall lowly at her feet, submit your will completely unto her, and then beg from her. He uses the word, if you read, grace for me entreat. Now this word entreat that he uses here actually means begging or beseeching, that even if you will have to beg in front of her, beseech in front of her, do. And the conclusion of this sonnet has got a very paradoxical statement, or rather a very contrasting statement. On the one side, it has got jubilation, and on the other side it has got, not that good a mood when he says, and if she grant, and if she grant, that is, if she grants the wish that I have been asking from her, then will be life great, and I will cherish this life if this wish be granted. If not, then die soon. Now again, what we find in this complete sonnet is a very plain and simple kind of idea that Edmund Spenser is floating. He is persuading his beloved. He is talking about the initial stage of his love, and he does not see any flaw in her beloved, which would even continue in Sonnet 5 and Sonnet 7 when we would be dealing with them. Almost similar kind of theme would be there, and though there is not too much of a mention of his beloved except in third stanza, or rather in third quatrain, but even there we have a passing reference of that fairest proud, and mostly the poet in this sonnet addresses his love, or it addresses that small child which actually represents the love which has born in his heart. So the sonnet is addressed to him, the complaints are for him. In other words, I would say that the complaint that Edmund Spenser is making here in the sonnet is to love. And the whole of this sonnet is addressed to love. Whole of this sonnet is addressed to his emotions that he feels for a particular lady to whom this sonnet is dedicated. That is all we have at the World of Literature. Today we dealt with the critical analysis of Amoretti's second sonnet from Amoretti. I hope the lecture has been helpful for you. Thank you for watching, and keep watching the World of Literature.